Welcome back. This is the Wednesday edition of the nation's most favorite breakfast show, Good Morning Namibia. Now, all children have a right to a safe and secure childhood, and it is the public's collective duty to ensure that all children in Namibia can realize this right. Recently, videos of child abuse have been making rounds on social media, not many days apart, where caregivers, guardians, and in some instances even parents are said to be the perpetrators. The Director of Childcare and Protection within the Ministry of Gender Equality, Poverty Eradication and Social Welfare, in fact, the control social worker, Madam Donata Shivoro, as well as social worker at the GBV unit in the Thomas region, Madam Walengwa Apinge, now join us with more. Good morning, ladies, and welcome to Good Morning Namibia.
Good morning, sir.
How are you doing on this gift of a Wednesday morning?
We are doing well. It's a bit cool, so it was good to wake up in the morning.
Yes, it's the first time I'm hearing someone say that. What about you, madam?
No, I'm very blessed. Can't complain.
Madam Shivora, I'd like to start with you, please. Talk to us about the videos that we have been seeing lately of suspected or alleged child abuse.
The videos are reached to us also, the ministry, and it's also a worrisome for the ministry also. But some of the video are not truth. There's no truth on every information that's been given to that. And I can believe that some of the citizens or the nations or the community member are now trying to take advantage of social medias. So it's also a good platform to tell people that it's not right to put a child in a social media. We know already the platform where should we report the cases. We have social worker, we have police officers. So if you come encounter of a child that is being abused, you take maybe probably a video now for evidence, which is very good. So you don't need to disseminate that video in the social media. Just take the video, go to the social worker or go to the police officers.
You're raising a critically important point. If we see a video, so it's not a message alleging something, it's visual material depicting clearly what transpired under particular circumstances. What would be untruthful about that, number one? And number two, what advantage would someone have to be lying about that?
The issue of poverty. In some cases, the people want to get, because they see that when you come in the social media, the donation will come in the millions. So they want to take that advantage. So, but in a way, there's no truth, in a whole truth in that situation. Maybe the child is also suffering, is true, but it's not the whole truth where what is really happening and all those type of things. So we are teaching our nation also bad things per se, to say, this is a child who growing up with lies already, who growing up with situation to say this is the way to go about.
One would also imagine that people could be making use of footage from other countries or from other jurisdictions, claiming that it was shot or filmed in Namibia as part of the lies.
Yes.
Yeah. Madam Apinge, but what we cannot dispute, unfortunately, is that this is also happening in Namibia.
Absolutely.
Please talk to us about the number of cases that the ministry has been recording since last year and whether you are observing an increase in the number of child abuse cases.
From my side or from the commerce table, we are looking at an average of 3 to 5 cases per week. So if you do the math, you would be able to, get an estimate around how many cases we are dealing with of child neglect, child abuse, child abandonment. Because obviously there is a category, what constitutes a child that is being abused? Is it a child being neglected? Is it a child, not receiving sufficient care? Is it a
Let's
child
please unpack that, because I think those are such important questions. What
Yeah.
constitutes abuse? What
Okay.
constitutes neglect?
Yeah. So abuse comes in different forms. Could be physical, could be sexual, could come also in an exploitation form. So in an exploitation form, for instance, let's say you are my brother, you obviously live a better life, and I ask you, please, take my child with you. But instead of you, ensuring that all the needs of my child are taken care of, what you do is then you would constantly, this child has to do all the chores, for instance, in the house. Not that chores are wrong, but we have to look at the age also of the child. The child, for instance, does not get enough time to do their schoolwork, so forth. Then we have what we call child neglect. Child neglect usually comes in when the child receives insufficient care. What do I mean by insufficient care? It means that the child is not receiving enough, for instance, medical care, nutritional care. There's no food at home. My colleague spoke about, the circumstances at home when it comes to poverty. So it could, derive from all of that. So later on, we sit with a child that is, for instance, malnourished or on their way to malnourishment. So that is often where the child neglect comes in. But it can also be the physical appearance of a child. Yeah, if you see that this is a child that is constantly not in a state in which they're supposed to look, yeah, the hair is always,
Unkept.
unkept. The child doesn't have shoes constantly.
Provided that the parents are able to provide that.
Yes,
Yeah.
provided that the parents are able to provide that. So all of those things taking into account. And then we have abandonment. Now, abandonment is what we usually categorize as baby dumping. But of course, we don't like to use that term. But that is where then a caregiver completely abandons a child, leaves a child in a riverbed, at a hospital, you name it. So that is what we mean in terms of child abuse. So we have different, categories when it comes to that.
Thank you so much for that clarification. Madam Shivoro, surely between 3 and 5 cases of child abuse, neglect and abandonment should concern us as a nation.
Yes, it's really a concern. But we also say that our Child Care Protection Act, it's very clear to all of us, to the whole community. And in a way also we have also a concern that maybe we have not yet sensitized all the community member to understand what the Act says. But also we also have a shortage of social workers. We may not really be able to reach out there. We are now here trying to work on the crisis. You see, this is the same social worker need also to go to the community to sensitize the community member. So it may not be able to be easy for us to sensitize the community, but the Act is there. You can also get it on internet, and one can also read about it.
Provided you have access to the internet.
Yeah.
One matter that we may have to accept responsibility for is that there may not be sufficient knowledge about the fundamentals of the Act. Could you summarize what exactly the Act wants us to do?
When it comes to child abuse, the Act wants the community member to report. There are even those are mandatory, like the professional, to report in writing to the social worker or to the police, social worker of Ministry of Gender. They are also asking for the community member, even in a neighbor, because when we look at some of these cases, the child had been suffering already in that household, but there are also neighbors surrounding.
Do the neighbors also have a statutory duty in terms of the Act to report the abuse that they witness?
Yeah, they are not mandated. Because
unfortunately,
they are not mandated because they are community members. But they also have a right to come to the social worker to say there's a child there and they have been protected.
Thank you.
It's not to say when you tell us, we then go to say it's Mr. Who have told us. We have a right to protect you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Madam Apingi, I think that brings us to the next question. One aspect that we just touched on with your colleague, namely that community members do not have a legal duty to report abuse, but they have the right to do so.
Yes.
Are there aspects of the Child Protection Act that perhaps need reform in order for us to strengthen the systems to see to it that we deal properly with child neglect, abuse and abandonment?
I think it all boils down to Namibia has beautiful acts, beautiful policies, but at the end of the day, it always comes to the challenge of implementation, the resources, that we need also to implement that. So as is, the Act is underway for amendments, They did do a consultative meetings with social workers and some of the community members to see where we can amend and see what will work best for Namibia. But again, like I said, it all boils down to, the resources that are needed or that are required to, make that possible.
From where you stand, and from the perspective of both the ministry but also from a social worker, which aspects would need amendment to strengthen perhaps loopholes?
Definitely an increase in social workers. We don't get to all cases on time, and that is probably one of the biggest challenges that we are facing. Transport resources, things like that. But definitely an increase in social workers. That could really go a long way, and that could really help us, follow through the entirety of a process when dealing with a child that is in need of protective services. Because we have a duty to report, and if I don't respond or if I don't act, then I too can be held accountable for that. I could be charged for that through the court. So I think that will really go a long way.
Are you saying that if we were to make it mandatory for every constituency to have a social worker, we may force the powers that be to see to it that there are sufficient human resources to try and deal with this challenge?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Madam Shivora, from where you stand, which are the other possible interventions, solutions, particularly those that are sustainable and long-lasting?
Currently, we have undergone the violence against children study, and we have also the findings of it, and then we are also collaborating with other stakeholders that everyone have also a duty to do. It's just a matter of time also, so that we are not only the ministry in this area of responding to the violence against children, but our stakeholders also are involved, and we are also involving them. And every organization or a protective organizations are also having their duty to be able to care for the children. And we are really on that, and every year. But as my colleague also has mentioned, said, when it comes to social worker also, it doesn't mean that the private organization also they have enough social workers also. So yeah, but we are there. We are really trying to respond to every need of the Namibian child.
Who are the key stakeholders that you are referring to, number one? And number two, the study focusing on violence against children that you have also spoken about. What have been the key findings?
Okay, let me say the stakeholders. We have also UNICEF. Yeah, we have also SOS. Those are our organization. We have also Childline Lifeline. They are also part of our stakeholder. We have also Minister of Education. We have also Minister of Health. All those are our stakeholders. Okay, when we come now to the study which was conducted, some of the findings that to say the children are being abused more increase in Namibia on everyday basis, as she have mentioned. And then the findings also that it's not only girl's child, it's also boy child. They are also encounter all this abuse, and we also need to focus on a boy child. You see, and it's from the younger age. It's not all about, as you know, most of the program now are more on a girl child. So we need also program, and Project Hope, they are also starting already busy to design program for a boy child. You see, to focus on them at the early age. Yeah. So these are type of the program that we are focusing on to try to see that we have really tried to work on the violence against children. Yeah.
Madam Mpinga, despite the potential pitfalls around social media, there is, thanks to media, definitely an increase in awareness around abuse, but also a real increase in abuse. What would we attribute this to? Why are caregivers, why are guardians, why are parents becoming more abusive towards their little ones?
Well, there are a number of reasons, of course, and I always say there's always a root cause. as I'd like to put it. And that can come from the way, for instance, you as a parent were raised. Maybe you also experienced abuse in your younger age. But we also look at things like post-traumatic stress disorder. Perhaps you've been through a traumatic experience. This could even be as like a car accident, and this boils up to, you know, a level of stress in your life where you're not coping as you used to, and that stress boils down to, you know, frustration in terms of, you know, how do you now parent this child? We're looking at things like lack of parenting skills. And that is something that we've worked over now over the years. There is a parenting program that have been designed to, you know, assist parents, you know.
Run by the ministry.
Run by the Ministry of
That is
Health.
a significant development.
Yeah, run by the Ministry of Health and Childline Lifeline. So most of the times where we get children that have been abused by their own parents or even guardians, we would usually refer them for these services, and we would monitor, or we would ask the court then to, you know, order that, you know, these parents go for mandatory classes. So could be lack of parenting skills, could be postpartum depression after pregnancy, after birth. You are now thinking, how am I going to cope with this new baby? I am not equipped. So it all boils down to that frustration. So it depends from person to person, from situation to situation. But our aim would always be really to find the root cause.
It may be necessary that before one embarks on a
Yes.
journey of parenthood to first reparent yourself
Absolutely.
and heal your own childhood wounds.
Yes.
Which brings us to the next question, and we're unfortunately running out of time. What is the long-term impact of abuse on a child, psychologically, emotionally, but also physically?
Yeah, we've obviously picked up an increase in child anxiety and depression. Most of them we would try to, you know, link them to psychologists as soon as possible, just so that those issues can be curbed or prevented. But definitely there is an increase in that. Suicidal thoughts in a younger age. I think last year we've picked up an increase in, you know, suicides amongst the younger children. And when I say the younger children, I mean 12 years and below. So even younger children are now starting to have suicidal thoughts. They may not understand exactly what it is, but they're having those thoughts. Then we look at the lack of self-esteem or low self-esteem. We're looking at a child that has suddenly been, you know, is withdrawn as opposed to their usual self. All of those, you know, issues that have to do with a person's personality or their potential growth. So all of that, it negatively impacts the whole being, to say.
And worst case scenario, they become abusers themselves.
Absolutely.
As adults.
Yeah.
Ladies, we've unfortunately run out of time. Madam Shivora, from your perspective, any concluding remarks on the way forward?
My conclusion, just to plead to the nations not to generate any video of child abuse if they happen to picked up a child who was suffering from neglect or abuse. Let them contact personally the Ministry of Gender Social Worker in everywhere, or GBV unit in everywhere in the country, and report such a case, rather than putting it in a social media. They know you are not protecting that child. You are still exploiting that child. Yeah.
We were talking earlier about potential reform to the Act. Perhaps one could think of criminalizing that conduct as part of the amendments on the cards.
Yeah, I believe so. I think it should be in. And then also my other point is that let's report. Let the professional people report. Let the neighbor report. We are also going to protect you. For its area, it's better. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank
Your
you.
final thoughts, ma'am?
Mine would always be on the preventative side. If, as a parent, as a guardian, you find yourself in a situation where you are overcome with thoughts of wanting to harm a child, seek help. There are social workers at Red Cross, for the Ministry of Health. At the hospitals, there are social workers. At our unit, there are social workers. Or just talk to somebody about it. I think that prevention could really go a long way in, reducing the number of child abuse, child neglect cases.
And it will be a safe space, because I think it takes quite a bit of emotional maturity to admit that I've got thoughts about harming my child or someone else's child. Ladies, thank you for your time and thank you for the great work that you continue to do.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
so much.
There you have it. Madam Donata Shivora, Control Social Worker, as well as Madam Walengwa Aipinge, Social Worker, GBV Unit in the Khomas region, talking to us about what we have seen as an increase in the number of cases of child neglect, abuse and abandonment. Remember, we have a collective responsibility to take care of the future of our country.